it's Therapy Thursday. Counting down 5, 4, 3. Stand by. Release my destiny. I want it all back. Therapy Thursday. Hey, how's everybody doing? So, hey, today is Therapy Thursday, and today we're going to talk about loneliness versus isolation. I'm dressed down today. After I finished my therapy sessions for today, I decided I wanted to get comfortable and I wanted to get a workout in. So, that's the mode I'm in. I am off for the day. I hope you all had a happy, healthy, and productive day today as well. So loneliness versus isolation. So loneliness, it is a subjective feeling about a person's perceived quality of relationships. Also, it is a gap between a person's actual social contact and their desired social contact. So basically, a person that is experiencing loneliness desires to have more social contact with their loved ones, family members, friends, whomever. So it doesn't necessarily mean when a person is lonely that they don't have people in their lives. It more so means that the frequency or quality of contact simply isn't there. A person can be married and be lonely. Individuals who are married or have children, or maybe they live with their parents, or they are surrounded by people, but they feel lonely. You may have heard of many celebrities over the years who report feeling lonely. Loneliness is more about, for some people, the quality of the relationships and the quality of the time spent, and also maybe the frequency of the contact. And it's subjective. Social isolation, on the other hand, is objective. Social isolation deals more with the number or the measure of actual contacts or relationships that a person has. So with social isolation, there are simply too few contacts. So a person who is socially isolated simply doesn't have a whole lot of people in their lives, and they have very little contact with other human beings. Social isolation is very dangerous. Human contact is normal, it's needed, it's necessary, and it is critical. Think about the moment that we are birthed into the world. The first thing they do is put us into our mother's arms, unless there is some type of medical condition that would hinder them from doing so. So that body to body contact, you may have seen videos at some point in which new parents were doing skin to skin contact with their newborns, and that human connection and that physical touch, that physical contact, it's very important. And in fact, for some infants, it is critical for their survival. Infants or newborns that don't have a whole lot of human contact or interaction don't tend to thrive. In fact, some of them don't make it beyond the first few months of life, unfortunately. So isolation can shorten a person's life regardless of your health status or your income. I have to mention that loneliness and depression can mimic each other. They can be very similar. So it's very important that you see a licensed clinician or mental health professional so that you can get a proper diagnosis for diagnosis. Don't try to diagnose yourself or do the self-diagnostic tests that you see on the internet. Those are great to get some idea as to what you might be dealing with, but use that as a tool to determine whether or not you need to seek professional help. So some of the similar changes or behaviors that you might see with someone who is lonely or someone who is depressed are agitation, mental fog, restlessness, irritability, self-doubt, changes in sleep pattern, weight loss or weight gain, and for some, physical pain may have increased. You may hear a person mention various somatic symptoms such as backache, stomach ache, headache, or pain of some sort that maybe they didn't have before. Depression is a mood disorder. It is a mental health condition that needs to be treated by a psychiatrist and a therapist. So I strongly encourage you to seek professional help for that if you are experiencing depression or the possibility of depression. Once again, allow the mental health professionals to diagnose you. Don't try to diagnose yourself. If you're simply feeling lonely, as I mentioned earlier, seek professional help. Even if you don't have a diagnosis of depression, major depressive disorder, or any mood disorder, it's still a good idea to see a mental health professional because a mental health professional can help you determine why you might be feeling lonely and help you to fill in some of those gaps. I have had over the years plenty of people come to me for therapy that don't necessarily meet the diagnostic criteria for major depressive disorder or any other mood disorder. However, there are some gaps in their life and some poor habits that have perpetuated the feelings of loneliness. If you are dealing with an actual clinical diagnosis, of course, medication is an option. Most mental health professionals will make a medication referral if necessary. So if you're having difficulty managing your symptoms without medication, your therapist may refer you to a psychiatrist for a prescription to manage your symptoms and moods. Everybody doesn't need to be on an antidepressant. Some do and some do not. Your clinician will help you to determine if medication might be a good fit for you. Securing a support system is also a great idea. The lonelier you are, the more you'll need support from others. Hi, S'more. As you can see, I have a support system. Hi, S'more. Say hello to everybody. Hi. Okay, well, can I finish the video and then we can play later? Okay. So, therapy with a licensed clinician is a great idea. Medication from a prescriber, if necessary, is also a good idea. Securing a support system is also necessary and critical for the people in your life that you can confide in, that you trust, and that you believe genuinely have your best interest at heart. Other interventions include getting rest. Sleep is key to optimal brain functioning. Mood disorders and depression occur in the brain, so make sure that you're getting an adequate amount of rest. Of course, exercise is also just as effective as medication for some people, not all. You need to talk to your mental health professional to determine if you need to be on medication or if a simple lifestyle change would be adequate or sufficient for you. Now remember, depression is a medical condition. Loneliness is not. However, loneliness is a feeling and can be just as heavy as depression for many people. A condition such as major depressive disorder, if left untreated, can linger for years and can hinder a good quality of life. So let's wrap this up. A person who's lonely simply wants more friends, wants more contact. A person who's lonely may not have that one person that they can ask for favors, such as, can you pick up a loaf of bread from the grocery store for me? Or can you pick the kids up? Can I borrow $25 to pay towards my water bill? Or whatever it is that you need. Everyone needs at least one person that they can rely on and trust for favors and to confide in. When you don't have those things, it tends to contribute to loneliness. Now, let's talk about some of the signs that a person might be socially isolated. This is typically a person that lives alone. A person who's socially isolated rarely leaves their home, rarely visits other people, rarely has other people to visit them in their home. A socially isolated person rarely has contact with their neighbors. A person who is socially isolated has very little contact with people outside of their home or outside of their work. And many of them don't have a lot of close familial relationships or social relationships. If they have a job, that's about the extent to which they socialize with or communicate or interact with other people. As I mentioned earlier, a person can be lonely but not socially isolated, and vice versa. A person can be socially isolated and not lonely. Many people are completely fine being isolated from others. In fact, some people prefer it. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, a lonely person can have many people around them, can live with others, but still feel lonely due to the quality of the relationships. There are a couple of risk factors that are noteworthy. I'd like to call attention to, first and foremost, individuals who live alone. A person that lives alone is at a higher risk for isolation than other people. In addition, an individual who is a senior citizen, age 65 years old or older, is at a higher risk of social isolation than someone who may be younger. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone 65 years of age or older, or anyone that lives by themselves 65 or younger, is socially isolated or even lonely. It just means that they may be at a higher risk. So if you have people in your life that are maybe a senior citizen, or if you have someone in your life that may or may not be a senior citizen and they live alone, it might not be a bad idea to check on them periodically. Now, of course, we all have those individuals in our lives that are 65 and older, or that are maybe younger and live on their own, that have much more of a social life than you do. So that's fine, but I'm referring to the individuals that you know that are older, or maybe they live alone, that don't necessarily connect with people outside of their home. They don't have friends. They're not traveling with their colleagues and with their old buddies from high school or college every now and then, or they're not engaged in other activities. I'm simply referring to individuals that you know that don't really connect with people outside of home or work. Let's talk about the impact of long-term loneliness and or isolation. Now remember, loneliness and isolation are not the same thing, but they have similar impacts on an individual's life. Research shows that individuals who are socially isolated or who are lonely long-term tend to experience or are at a higher risk of experiencing mental and physical deterioration. Meaning, if they are elderly, they may not get around as much, or they may be less mobile than someone their age that is not isolated or lonely. Mental health-wise, a person who's lonely or socially isolated may be more depressed or at a higher risk for depression than the average person. So that, once again, is a risk for mental decline. And for elderly people, cognitive decline is also a risk for individuals who are socially isolated and don't have frequent contact with others. So they may be at a higher risk for things like memory loss and dementia and things of that nature. Unfortunately, a person who is socially isolated long-term or experiences loneliness long-term is at a higher risk for early death. So loneliness and isolation subtracts years from your life, unfortunately. Some of the behaviors that an individual who may be isolated or lonely may be excessive consumption of alcohol and or drugs or any type of abuse of substances, abuse of food, which would cause an individual to possibly be obese, and other risky behaviors such as smoking. So someone who is socially isolated is at a higher risk to abuse substances, to smoke, to overindulge in unhealthy eating, and so forth. Meaning their risk for being mentally and physically unhealthy is increased compared to someone who is more connected to other people. As a result of these possible risky, unhealthy behaviors, an individual suffering from social isolation or loneliness is at a higher risk for diseases such as heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and obesity, which can all subtract years from an individual's lives and cause deterioration in a person's overall quality of life. So as I mentioned earlier, get active, get connected, and if you are invited to go out and socialize and interact and connect with other people, don't turn down the invitation. People who tend to socially or maybe struggle with depression or anxiety habitually turn down offers to get engaged with other people in social activities, or they turn down invitations. And they do it on a habitual basis. Sometimes they may accept an invitation and not show up because they allow a lot of negative thinking to prevent them or even cripple them from attending the event or social gathering, and very often they regret it afterwards. Leave your house, period. Get out of the house. Get involved in some extracurricular activities and find some hobbies. Very often people want to know, what do they enjoy? Sometimes it doesn't exist, so you have to create it. Find something that you enjoy by trying different things. What would you like to enjoy? Maybe you never enjoyed anything outside of being a parent, an employee, and a spouse, and a daughter or a son, but never have really had any hobbies or extracurriculars that you believe have improved your quality of life. So sometimes you have to create them because they simply aren't there. Also, assess your relationships. If you are engaged in relationships with multiple individuals who simply are not able to add quality to those relationships, and you're not able to confide in them, ask them for favors, or be yourself around them, then assess and determine whether or not those are relationships that you need to maintain. And if the relationships are of good quality, or they are potentially of good quality, and you have found that you have been the one to deflect the interaction, increase and improve quality time with your loved ones. Don't be afraid. Once it becomes normal and habit, you will more than likely look forward to it and do it more often, hence being less likely to socially isolate. If social isolation and or loneliness has a negative impact on your ability to perform daily tasks or causes significant deterioration in your overall quality of life and sense of well-being, please seek professional help. My phone number is 618-717-2732, or you can reach me at carmelbrowncounseling.com. If you happen to feel hopeless or worthless, or you're having thoughts of self-harm or suicide, please call 911 and get immediate help. Many therapists today are backed up and booked for many weeks ahead of schedule. So if you were to call some therapist today, you may not get an appointment for a month. So if there is a critical issue such as self-harm, suicidal thoughts, or you're feeling helpless, hopeless, or worthless, please call 911 and get immediate help, and keep your appointment with your mental health professional that you have scheduled. That's all I have for today, guys. It's Therapy Thursday. Thank you for listening. Today's episode of Isolation versus Loneliness. If you have any questions, once again, KarmaBrownCounseling.com, 618-717-2732. See you soon.